viewers, Dr. Jason W. Morrison, Theologist, New South Wales, Australia, and I've decided to, as far as I can, rerun the Australian Royal Commission videos on the channel. I just don't want people to forget what happened back there. Obviously, the Jehovah Witnesses are pretty ignorant of the Australian Royal Commission. So I'm going to do everything I can to try and run these videos. It's going to be lengthy, but I want to open it with Barbara Anderson's Watchtower documents. I'll put the link below. The Australian Royal Commission by Barbara Anderson. An Australian Royal Commission held formal public hearings to examine evidence about child sexual abuse within religious and charitable organisations in that country, in Australia, in my country. There are over 30 of these ongoing investigations involving a large number of religions and charities. Each public hearing examined a number of individual case studies involving different public and private organisations. Jehovah Witnesses were among the religious organisations being investigated. The Commission wanted to know specifically how Jehovah Witnesses and the Watchtower Society responded to allegations of child abuse involving members of their congregations. In 2015, the Royal Commission's public hearings involving Jehovah Witnesses were scheduled and heard in Sydney starting on Monday, July the 27th, and continued through to August 14th, 2015. The intent of the hearings was to investigate the actual practices and policies of the Jehovah Witnesses and Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia Limited in situations of reported and suspected child abuse or endangerment. Following up hearings were scheduled for spring 2017 to review the Watchtower of Australia's policy changes and plans for corrective action. 2017. On March 10, 2017, the Commission held follow-up hearings to hear the Watchtower representatives' descriptions of any corrective actions taken by the Australian branch of Jehovah Witnesses over the past 18 months. More than 5 hours of sessions, the Commission was not satisfied and clearly disappointed with the testimony and voiced their displeasure with the efforts and official responses by the Watchtower branch representatives. Now that's serious. You can follow this link if you want to hear the hearings. And I'm going to put these hearings up in this rerun of the Australian Royal Commission program. The scope and purpose of the hearings were to inquire into the experiences of survivors of child sexual abuse within the Jehovah Witness Church in Australia, the response of the Jehovah Witness Church and the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia Limited to allegations, reports or complaints of child sexual abuse within the Church, the systems, policies and procedures in place within the Jehovah Witnesses Church and the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia Limited for raising and responding to allegations of or concerns about child sexual abuse within the Church, and the systems, policies and procedures in place within the Jehovah Witness Church and the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia Limited to prevent child sexual abuse within the Church. During and after the hearings, the Commission provided witness lists, transcripts, exhibits, images and associated submissions for each case study and makes them publicly available on the Commission's website. And you can go to that website yourself if you want the evidence. Submissions. After hearing, the Council assisting the Royal Commission will provide witnesses and other people who were granted leave to appear at the hearing a written submission detailing what was discovered during the case study. The submission will outline key findings based on the hearing evidence and the recommendations likely to come from them. The recipients of the submission may then provide their own written submissions in reply. The Commissioners then consider this information and when they form their final recommendations during the course of the Royal Commission. In the articles below you will find videos of the live streams of the public hearings and transcripts of those hearings and complete sets of the exhibits used by the Commission that were provided by those involved in the case. Many of these exhibits have never been publicly available before. And here's some of the stuff you can see. But I'm going to go now to live footage from the Australian Royal Commission on the Jehovah Witnesses, Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, Church organisation. I hope you enjoy this series.
Wearing the purple tie is on the screen, and he's accompanied by a legal representative who would announce himself to Your Honour.
Good afternoon. May it please the Royal Commission, my name is Macmillan, spelled M-C-M-I-L-L-A-N, initials B-I. I'm a barrister instructed by the Crown Law Office of Queensland. I appear for the State of Queensland and Mr Jason Davies. I understand the State of Queensland has been granted leave to appear in this case study.
That's so. So you have leave to appear.
Thank you, Your Honour.
It's Mr Davies, isn't
Yes, Your Honour.
it? You'll need to be sworn. Have you got a Bible, or do you want to take an affirmation?
Affirmation, please.
Yes. Would you stand for me if you could? And just repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission
that the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Yes, thank you. Take a seat. Yes, Mr Stewart.
As Your Honour pleases. Mr Davies, would you state your full names for the record, please?
Jason Peter Davies.
And Mr Davies, do you have with you two statements by you provided to the Royal Commission, one dated 8 July 2015 and the other dated 20 July 2015?
I have my two statements, yes.
Is there any respect in which you would like to correct or amend the statements?
No.
Do you confirm them to be true and correct?
I do.
I tender the statements, Your Honour.
The first one will be Exhibit 2911, that's the one of the 8th of July. The second one, Exhibit 2912.
Mr Davies, you are presently employed as the Principal Legal Officer at the Department of Education and Training for the State of Queensland, is that right?
Yes.
And you were admitted, you are a barrister admitted to practice in Queensland?
Yes.
And you have been since September 1998?
That's correct.
And as I understand it, prior to commencing your present role, you were a legal officer at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions?
Yes.
And you were in that position from August 1999 until August 2003?
Yes.
And was it in that capacity that you came to handle the prosecution against the person known in these proceedings as BCH for offences in relation to the abuse of his daughter BCG?
Yes.
Can you explain when in the proceedings, in the criminal proceedings, you became involved?
I was a case lawyer in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. I worked in what was known then as the Committals Work Group in Brisbane. The Committals Work Group handled matters conducted, committals matters conducted in the Brisbane Magistrates Court. And I took over a particular cipher within the Committals Work Group. The cipher was known as CPA, which is a designation they give to a particular position. The lawyer before me in that position was Belinda Merrin, who's now a prosecutor. I took over her files, and one of those files was the one involving the people you've mentioned. And at that point in time, the proceeding was a part-heard committal. I think 2 days had already been heard in the matter, and I had about 1 day to go to conduct the committal. And that's really the context in which I came into contact with the matter.
And thereafter, did you have the conduct of the matter in its preparation for trial in the district court?
Yes.
And
which
you finish?
Which entailed simply preparing a précis, which is described as a schedule of facts in the material for the prosecutor in preparing the indictment and attending to the instructions for the presentation of the indictment.
So is it the case you didn't personally prosecute the matter?
No.
Now, were you involved in the capacity you've described right through the case until ultimately conviction and sentence?
No. I was involved from memory. Really, the way it worked in the Office of DPP was you would, in terms of being a preparation officer, you would be responsible for a file up at really, you'd have core responsibility for a file until the indictment was presented. And then, in effect, the file would move then, would sit in your cupboard until it was allocated to a prosecutor, and then the prosecutor would effectively take carriage of the matter. They'd have a clerk that would assist them from the office, and then they would mainly rely upon that clerk and police officers until the matter was resolved. They'd only come back to the case lawyer, really, if there was something specifically they wanted the case lawyer to do. And I don't recall, for example, in the remaining time that I worked at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, anyone coming back to me specifically about this matter, except, I think, to advise me of the outcome of voir dire in relation to the first trial.
And what were you advised in that regard?
It was in relation to the admissibility of some inculpatory statements made by the accused. I'd formed a view that we might have some difficulty in relation to that, and I was advised subsequently that they'd been excluded on voir dire. Well, that's what I recall anyway.
Now, I understand from other evidence that there were 3 trials. The first resulted in a hung jury, the second a mistrial, and then the third a conviction on a number of counts. Is it the case that those outcomes were not reported to you over time?
No.
Now, the schedule of facts that you've spoken of, I don't know, do you have a copy of it with you by any chance?
I do.
Right, and we have it here. It's at Tender Bundle tab 37. In the form in which you have it, Mr. Davies, does it have a ringtail reference in the top right-hand corner?
It does.
Can you identify the reference of the document you're looking at?
It says QLD full stop 0068 full stop 001 full stop 1267.
Right. And there's a statement in that schedule of facts in capital letters in the middle column which says a crucial factor in this trial is the social environment created by the congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, which has strongly influenced the behaviour of the defendant and all witnesses. Did you cause that statement to be recorded there?
Yes.
Why did you write that, Mr. Davies?
I had done a lot of preparation of offence matters involving sexual abuse of children, but this matter stuck out for me because I really had no exposure to matters involving the Jehovah's Witnesses. And when I read the material, conducted the last day of the committal, had spoken to the complainant, I think on more than one occasion, I formed the view that it was important that whoever subsequently had the file after I'd done the initial preparation work should instantly know that there was a context that underpinned the whole case. And I think perhaps I was just naive and that I had no understanding of the Jehovah's and how they approach these type of matters. To be frank with you, I'd assumed that any adult who had heard the type of complaints that the victim in this case mentioned would instantly go to the police. So really what I was doing by putting that on the schedule was just making sure that people were alerted to the fact that this was not a run-of-the-mill type of matter.
Beyond what you've explained with regard to going to the police, is there anything you were referring to in saying the influence and behaviour of the Jehovah's Witness faith?
Yes, it also, I think, covered off 2 other matters, in my thinking at least. One was the time frame, an explanation for the time frame between the allegations first being made by the complainant and then subsequently coming to the attention of the police, which was a period of some years. Just being in working in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, you become aware that it's not uncommon for defence counsel, particularly in so-called historical sex abuse cases, to raise delay as almost a form of impeachment of the complainant. So that part of my thinking there was that this would be partially to explain, when you looked at the evidence that the complainant gave, her faith was a significant explanation for why it took so long for her to go to the police. Secondly, it related to the circumstances in which the accused made the inculpatory statements I referred to earlier, which was something I'd never encountered before. I considered highly unusual, and I considered that it would have an impact on the admissibility of those statements.
And do you recall what those circumstances were?
In terms of the inculpatory statements?
Yeah, the circumstances of the inculpatory statements.
The circumstances were that he went before a couple of committees of the Jehovah's Witnesses and had allegations put to him in front of a panel of elders, and he gave a response and they made findings. That was one aspect of it. It was kind of like a court proceeding in a way. The second aspect is that he, as part of his faith, as it was explained to me, I think possibly by the complainant, was that the more truthful he was at a certain point, the more chance later on he would get to be returned to the faith after being disfellowshipped. So two aspects, I suppose. One, he was encouraged or required to be truthful by the tenets of his faith, and the second was the more truthful and honest he was, the more chance that his punishment would end early.
So the one aspect you've identified is the delay that's caused by the handling of the matter internally to the church. Are there other consequences that you experienced in the preparation of this particular case that the handling of the matter internally to the church caused?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
You've explained that because the matter was handled internally to the church and not reported to the police, there was a considerable delay before it was ultimately reported to the police. And you've explained,
that's correct.
You've explained the problem with the delay. Were there other difficulties that arose because of the manner in which the matter was handled internally to the church?
To my thinking, the only other major problem was in relation to the admissibility of the accused's statements. I think that there were the other problem that I didn't focus on as much because it didn't necessarily impact directly on the prosecution of the matter, but I acknowledge it, is that the way the complaints were handled internally by the church must have had a terrible impact on the complainant, and it led her complaints to be exposed to a very wide variety of people, more so than you would normally see in a sexual abuse case, where a young victim would speak to maybe one other person perhaps, and then the matter would end up in the hands of the police. In this particular case, the complainant was forced to go before at least 3 other members of the church. I think her mother was present, father was there. I'm not sure whether any other persons were there. That was only on the first occasion. On the second occasion, it was even a bigger panel. And these are at least on the first occasion, people who live in her local community. So undoubtedly she was subject to some gossip and innuendo that might have resulted from the revelation of those matters.
And whether in this case or more generally, do you conceive of there being potentially a difficulty with regard to the contamination of evidence?
Yes, that's true. Probably not as important in this case because of the age of the complainant and the relevant consistency of her statements over the years. I wouldn't have anticipated that as being specifically necessarily a problem in this case, but potentially in other cases, yes. It's true to say that the fewer people who discuss the matters directly with the complainant, the better, at least until it's in the hands of the police where they conduct a proper interview process with non-leading questions.
No, I don't wish to put you on the spot on.
Yeah, Dr. Jason Morrison, theologist again. I just want to say thank you for watching the videos, and I hope you got plenty of self-rediscovery and freedom out of it. If you watched it on YouTube, please share or like, maybe even comment. If you watched it on Facebook, like, comment, share. But most of all, get out and live. This isn't a rehearsal. You've got a one-off life. Don't let your loyalty and your faithfulness blind you to the life that you should be experiencing. Till the next video, thank you for watching, and bye for now.